All right, so we're going to switch over to the NFC Championship game. This one was a roller coaster for, I'd say, both Niners fans and Lions fans. Lions, they were up 24-7 at halftime. Only scored one touchdown for the rest of the game. The Niners scored 27 of their 34 points in the second half. If you're a Lions fan, I think you're happy with how the season went, considering you hadn't made the playoffs in a little bit. First playoff win, 2 this year in 30 years. But you're probably pissed off considering you had the one of the best teams in the NFL for the past 5 years, multi-time NFC Championship appearance, Super Bowl appearance. 49ers, you had them down, let it go. Now you're sitting at home with everybody else.
Yeah, man, we've talked about this throughout the playoffs too. The Lions in the second half have not been amazing. They were once again not good in the second half. Obviously, they survived that against the Rams. Didn't put up many points, but they did enough to not lose. In this one, they did not do enough to not lose. They blew a 17-point lead. They scored 3 points in the second half. The Niners scored 27. Everything fell apart. Look at it on paper. Starting with the winners. It's pretty simple. A tale of a few players. I mean, the Niners are a great, pretty dynamic team overall. They're pretty much locked in the second half. Brock Purdy overall in the whole day goes 20 for 31, 267 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. He's actually second on his team with 48 rushing yards. I saw a lot of tweets this week about Brock Purdy having an interesting ability to be able to, throw a few incompletions and then all of a sudden take off like you've never seen before at high speed. He did that a few times in this game. Not necessarily followed by after the incompletions, but definitely had some runs here where it was like, man, he's an interesting runner for sure. Speaking of running, though, the Niners running game was led by no other than CMC himself. Happy as a Panthers fan to see him make the Super Bowl from winning this game. Didn't look like he was going to, but he put in the work to get his team there. He led the ground game with 90 yards and 2 touchdowns. So he will go to play in his first Super Bowl. Elijah Mitchell had just 7 yards, but he got a pretty big late game touchdown as well. Might not have seemed as big, I think, when they got it. I think it put them up for a certain little margin, but the Lions did score after, so it's his touchdown ended up being decently instrumental for the game's success. Deebo Samuel led the Niners in the air with 89 yards. But Brandon Ayuk got the only air touchdown, and he had 68 yards on the day to go along with it. A lot of them came from one big catch that we'll talk a little more about here in a few minutes. For the Lions, the stat sheet for the most part is going to look pretty good because they were up 24-7 at halftime. I mean, there's nothing. If you look at this Lions score, obviously this is a 34-31 game, so the box score should tell you that both teams played decently well. The box score won't tell you that the Lions fell apart in the second half, but me and Terrence will tell you that for sure. We'll get you the context. But on the whole game, Jared Goff, 25 for 41, 273 yards, just 1 touchdown for him. Him and Brock actually have pretty similar games in this one, except that Jared Goff does not do a whole lot of running and didn't really need to. The Detroit run game had a lot going on. David Montgomery led them, 93 yards and a touchdown for him. Jahmyr Gibbs continues to be valuable to that team, a valuable high pick. He was second on the ground with 45 yards and a touchdown, and then Jameson Williams was third with 42 yards and a touchdown, but that is from a 42-yard eruption very early in the game. First score. It is a really crazy. I mean, he's finished third on the day in rushing, and he never rushed again after that. It was a bit of an insane 42-yard eruption. Sam Laporta and Amon-Ra St. Brown led the Lions in the air with 97 and 87 yards, respectively. But again, it was actually Jameson Williams who got himself a touchdown. He was third in receiving with 25 yards, so decently behind his 2 teammates, but still making his impact felt. Now, how did the Lions do all this and lose the game? How did the Niners do all that scoring in the second half? The simple answer is that the Lions defense is a liability and can force some mistakes. Obviously, Brock did throw a pick. But at the same time, they're a danger if you have good receivers, and the Niners have Deebo Samuel and then Brandon Ayuk, who are both, starting, number 1 receiver caliber for many teams in this league, and that started to really start to come out in prime form in that second half. Another thing is that they just kept making little mistakes. They almost get a pick, and instead that pick gets bobbled. It goes up into the air. Ayuk gets it for like a 50-yard dot, and then they score a few plays later. So that's a major part. That makes it 24-17 after that score. So they really get into momentum. A pick there might have shifted the energy for the Lions. not getting the pick is one thing, but definitely popping it into the air straight to Brandon Ayuk's arms. You can't really fully blame the safety there, but that's still going to be that's harsh. That's rough. And I'm sure by the time we're getting this video up, you know what happened in this game. We alluded to it on our previous episode. If you've seen our Chiefs Ravens video, talking about that, we will talk about going forward on fourth down. Dan Campbell, the Lions have have succeeded through his tactics all season. I'll give him the credit before I start to talk about this game in particular. For the most part, anytime the Lions have decided to be aggressive and go for it, it has worked out. Even last week, when they needed to go for it a few times to ensure that their season stayed alive, that happened, that worked. They moved forward. This one, not so much. Then when they went to go for it on fourth down 2 times, they gave up easy field goal attempts. I say easy. It should be for a playoff kicker. Maybe not if you don't ever get to kick field goals because your coach is always going for it. But he had hit one, obviously to make it 24-10, and then or 24-7. Then we're up. It's up 24-10 at this point. He gives up a 46-yarder to try to go for it on fourth down. They don't convert. A little bit later, they give for it on fourth down again. They don't convert. That is a direct swing of 6 points. The Lions have lost out on 6 points right there. And from there, we can think about that. They only scored 7 in the second half. And despite only scoring 7 in the second half, they only lost by 3, and they allowed 27 points. So had they gotten those 6 points, 6 free points, they would have won by 3 if everything else went the exact same. Obviously, you can't prove that it would go that way, but if you just take those field goals, your team's in a better position, especially when you're up 24-10. There's not really a reason to be aggressive because you shouldn't have the mindset of like that Niners team can't beat us or they can't score because we're up 24-10. You started to stall out at the end of the first half anyway, and then you had to settle for a field goal. And then the Niners come out, get some points. They're trying to find a little bit of momentum, and all you're going to do by missing or by turning over on downs is give them momentum. That's what happens here. We can make the argument that if they get these first downs, then it's a smart play. We talked about this before we started recording today. Me personally, I'm under the mindset of like, it's not necessarily a smart play whether he gets it or not. I think it's kind of a gutsy, probably bad idea even if he does get it. But if you do get it, then you've succeeded on that gamble, right? Like if I don't do sports betting, but if I put in $200 on a bet, I can say it was a good idea if it pays out and I get $400. By the end of the day, I'm putting $200 on the line. I might not get it back. It's probably not that good of an idea. It'll be great if I get it. But that doesn't really change that deciding to do the thing isn't necessarily always good. So Dan has been aggressive all year. Obviously, it's worked out a lot of times. He's got a decent reason to try to believe that his team would be good. But at some points, you just got to take the points. You got to think, we're in a playoff game. We have a Super Bowl on the line. We have existed as a franchise forever. We've been 0-16. I was on the team as a tight end when we went 0-16. We've never made the Super Bowl in our long, long storied history. We got to do everything we can to be sure that we change that. And sometimes I think playing aggressively is taking the points. It's just especially when you're up 24-10. At that point, what you want to do is keep beating the other team down. Take the extra points. Take 3 points. Make it. They just gained 3. They made it 24-10. Now they're looking at okay. We've got just 14 points to get it to a tie. Put 3 back up. Put them back where they were before. Leave them in that constant state of like, oh man, okay, now we got to chase that field goal again. Instead, you give up 6 free points. You end up allowing 27 in the second half because your defense stops playing defense. You get a good score towards the end of the game, but then you're relying on an onside kick with 50 seconds left. That's really hard to do. Those are rarely converted. This one was not, and you go home. And you're gonna go home. Let the Niners go to the Super Bowl, play their rematch against the Chiefs. Dan Campbell said after the game, I think maybe this could have been our only shot. Rough world for the NFL. That could be true. It also could not. I mean, it depends on kind of who this Lions team is able to retain player-wise and what happens with the rest of the division. Obviously, I'm sure nobody really thought they'd lead this division this year. So it'll be interesting to see where they go from here. And I'm not going to put this whole game onto Dan Campbell. Obviously, the Lions defense messes up. The Lions offense starts to stall out. Not entirely. I mean, the offense could have put up 13 in the second half instead of just 7. Still not like ideal, but not horrible. I mean, the Chiefs put up 0 against the Ravens in the second half, and they were able to come off with a win. So some of it is, they don't take those easy points. The defense allows too many easy points. Everything just went wrong for Detroit in the second half. And you could maybe argue that it was the Pistons' fault. I guess I've seen that because the Detroit Pistons won a basketball game against the 1 seed in the West at the time, Thunder. And then the Lions lost. And I don't think these two teams have won on the same day like all season. So that's a little unfortunate. That's just more joking around about the city of Detroit's sports success. But hey, Michigan won the Natty this year. You come away with something.
Yeah, they come away with something, but not what they wanted. Look, this game is not all on Dan Campbell, but part of it is obviously, and again, we can always say like, hey, if it had worked, we call him a genius, we call him a god. And like, it's so it is what it is. With that being said, I don't agree. My, kind of what we talked about with the Ravens and Chiefs, that Chiefs drive that ended after they got the fumble from Lamar, went for on a fourth down right up the middle against that Ravens defense, that wasn't going to happen. Same kind of scenario here. Like, I understand why they would go for it. And it's not just because, obviously that's Dan Campbell's philosophy. But besides that, you do have the San Francisco 49ers on the other side. And I do think that he kind of was like, of the feeling of like, hey, they got a field goal of that first drive at the half. But I think he was probably thinking, like, you know what? We should just try and get as many points as possible. Now, it is, again, that gamble. Like, sure, you could just hit the field goal, go up 27-10, and because of that, maybe they come back and keep scoring touchdowns, and then now the field goal is not going to help you, or you can get that touchdown and go up 31-10 at that point. Now, as great as the 49ers played in the second half, like, it would have taken a lot for them to overcome that kind of deficit. So I understand the logic behind it. Like, let's go for it, keep the drive going, maybe get a touchdown here instead of having to settle for a field goal. Bleed some more of that clock, because now, especially with the time, you're at that point, it would have been probably like 5 minutes left in the fourth, or excuse me, the third. You're bleeding clock, you're up one more touchdown instead of just being a field goal. I understand the logic there because the Niners, they were going to come back at some point. Like, even despite how well the Lions offense and the defense played in that first quarter, especially, like, you just kind of got this feeling like the Niners are not going to get completely destroy the entire game. Like, outside of the Ravens game, it just simply hasn't happened this year. So, even the games that they lost, early on, on that losing streak, like, it's not something that happened too many times. So we shouldn't expect for the Niners, despite them getting beat up early on, to sit there and take it for the rest of the game. So I understand the logic of trying to keep applying pressure there, trying to keep scoring. But on the other hand, again, it's just like points just had such a premium in the playoffs, and any points at that point, not to be redundant there, but any points would have mattered. So I understand the logic there because they kept scoring touchdown after touchdown after touchdown. But I feel like you have to take those points. And maybe that one wasn't as bad, but the one, obviously, the second one now, the first one that should have been caught by Josh Reynolds. So like that's not a discussion. That's his fault. But the second one, obviously, now you're slightly behind. You're down by a field goal. You're at the 30. Like, you got to tie it up. Like, I understand. Again, they went and scored a touchdown on the next drive. But like, I just you can't. You just can't sit there with that idea of just like, we're just going to go all for nothing here. It's like, at some point you have to play smart. Take those points. Like, you're down 3, like that's a whole 17-point swing just like that you let up in the third quarter. Like, not in the fourth. Just take those points. Tie it up. Let's keep going. Like, you finally held them to just a field goal on that last drive. Another really long drive for the Niners. Don't make another mistake here. But they do. Can't get it complete. At that point, I don't care about the last touchdown on that last drive because, I mean, let's be honest here. The game wasn't completely over, but 3 minutes left. You're down 10. Like, especially, Greg Olsen kept saying it, that when they got down in the go-to-go situation and they had to use a timeout after that David Montgomery run right at the 3-yard line, I think, and he didn't get it. Obviously, it's third down. Now it's fourth down. You have to use a timeout. So now you're forcing yourself to have to kick an onside kick. It's like there's so many points in this game where they put themselves into a bad situation. And obviously, the offense not scoring a touchdown until the last couple minutes of the fourth in the second half, and the defense allowing 27 points in the second half. That's obviously a huge issue, but they weren't helped by some of these decisions that were made and some of the mistakes that were made. So, that's just really that's the biggest thing that happened in this game. Like the running game was so good early on. I mean, those first two drives, and we talked about this in the picks video. Like both teams are really good against the run, top 5 this year, and both teams can run the ball really well. And McCaffrey had some moments, but for the most part, like it wasn't like every single down he was getting that many yards. Like there was a lot of runs that just didn't go anywhere. But when it needed him, and he was able to make some big plays like he always does, he did it in Carolina too. Like this wasn't surprising for him. It's just they didn't get it consistently going the way the Lions did early on. I mean, it was literally like just every single play getting run over by this Lions running game. And you can talk about how they, in the second half, obviously the running game they didn't go to the running game nearly as much. One time I would disagree at what they went to, the Amon-Ra St. Brown play right before that Josh Reynolds drop. Like I thought that was a stupid call, to be honest with you, getting Amon-Ra right up the middle for like that was stupid. So I feel like that was a bad decision in the first place. And Jahmyr Gibbs fumbling, like maybe that was part of why they didn't go, they didn't start running it more. And they had one running play on that next drive for them. And then by that time, that's when they were down by 3. And then the next drive, they're down by 10. So like they did abandon the run, but at that point too, like they didn't really have much of an option considering the lead changed so fast. And it was just every single drive for the Niners offense. They were hitting them, scoring every single time. Like even some of those lucky plays, like you said, I mean, like they could have gotten an interception there. I mean, like that's just a freak thing that kind of happens. Like you're not expecting that, but once you got to that point in the game, like you really couldn't run the ball the way you wanted to anymore because of what had happened, mistakes or whatever, where you were in the game, the score. So they did abandon the run. I understand why later on they couldn't really run the ball because again, situationally, it just doesn't make sense. But yeah, it's just the mistakes. The obviously the fumble there immediately led to a touchdown. The overall the defense was god awful. You said it, the secondary in the second half, and we talked about it. The secondary would probably be the issue in this one if it comes down to it. Debo did play. CJ Gardner-Johnson should probably just sit down and shut up for a little bit, if we're going to be honest here. Again, respect him. He's a good player. Stop. Please stop. Like it's a lot more than just the fourth downs. It's a combination of things. The offense and defense played lights out first half. Didn't do jack in the second half on both sides of the ball. Turnover, going for it when he shouldn't have. A lot of things contribute to a team having a 24-7 lead over a great team, one of the best teams in the league, not scoring much of anything in the second half, fumbling that away the opportunity. No pun intended there. Like it's a lot more into it than just the fourth down calls, but it's like the Ravens game. Like it's a lot more than just the refs thing here. Like Lamar, not right. Like there's a lot going into it. Teams don't just lose games on one singular play. So definitely, definitely frustrating. But it's there are things that they can take away from this game. I'll say that before I pass it back. They can take away things from this game. What went wrong? Because at the end of the day, if they kept doing what they supposed to, not had those mistakes, it could have beaten the 49ers. So it's not like just because the Niners are great again, like they could have held the Niners to field goals. They could have not turned it over on fourth downs. It's not like it was a foregone conclusion that the Niners were going to come back and beat them. I just we just all kind of assumed that the Niners would at least come back and be a lot better.
Yeah, I mean, this is such a complex loss, I think, and I think you really nailed it in that segment. There's just so much going on for the Lions here, and that's a great point there as well. Like all these touchdown drives that start coming up in the second half for them. I mean, the Niners go field goal, touchdown, touchdown, field goal, touchdown, and at the end they turn it over on downs. But that's just the game's in it. Some of those touchdowns turn into field goals. I mean, just two of them, and you get a win one of them, and you're looking at overtime. All right, no, that's not how math works. My bad. Just a few of those touchdowns turn into field goals, and you're looking at a victory. Even just one of them, and you're looking at maybe a win, depending on the circumstances. So that's going to be a big thing. Turning it over on downs, of course, we've both just spent a good bit of time talking about Dan Campbell here. The fumble is big for momentum, right? One of the big things about getting that, if they would have got that pick on that crazy play, you're looking at an obviously pretty bad field position from where the pick would have been from. But at the same time, you're also looking at like the Niners started to get a little roll, and then you just put a stop on it. You kind of snuff out the fire a little bit, and maybe you can get in their head some. Instead, you mess up that pick. It gets to Brandon Ayuk. They score the touchdown. Then you fumble on the first play of the next drive, and they've got great field position, and they score again. And momentum is all there. They're mentally and everything. There's nothing really holding back the Niners. They've come out of halftime thinking, all right, we got 17 points to get out of the way, and then we can think about taking the lead. And I mean, just like that, 3 drives, that 17 points is gone. Football, it can be a mental game. It can be a game of mental momentum, and you gotta kind of know that. And I think you also have to acknowledge that like sometimes the football gods are gonna look down on you and give you a little bit of a break, give you a little bit of help. Right, you're up 24-7 on the Niners team. That I'm not going to say is like way better than the Lions. I think the Lions have been a good team this year. They're both 12-5. Niners on paper probably look a lot better, but the Lions have played really good football all season. They played gritty football. It's not crazy that you're up on the Niners, but it is crazy that you've held that offense to 7 points in the first half. And you got to know probably as a coach, like, all right, this team knows that like this is not their usual performance. Even in games where they've where they might lose, they're going to play better than that for the most part. Not the Ravens game, but otherwise, yeah. And instead, you kind of come out, you're a little too aggressive. You turn it over after they've scored 3, and then they score a touchdown. You start messing it up, and then of course you go 3 and out, so you can't really blame you on that one. But now it's tied, and they get a field goal, take a 3-point lead, and then you turn it over on downs again. You got to really start thinking like we got to change our mindset here. The Niners are rolling. We got to do something, lock in somewhere to try to take out some of that momentum. And I think the run game would have been helpful to that, but I do agree that at a certain point you start to lose confidence in your own self, right? You've kind of looked away from the run game, and then Jahmyr Gibbs fumbles, and now you kind of probably don't really want to go back, and you've got a really good passing offense as well. I don't know. I think mentally the Lions were prepared to be here, and then once it started to slip away, I think as at the same time that the Niners started to score on their own kind of agency, the Lions were also messing up a lot, and I think it was just a landslide of both things of like, oh no, like they're scoring and we're not, and we're we keep making little mistakes, and they keep heating up, and they're probably just kind of mentally stacked up. They did do a good job towards the end of the game to lock in on a 4th down and throw a touchdown. But again, at that point, you got 50 seconds left in the game. You have to get an onside kick and then hope to push it into a good field goal range. It's just that's great that you scored there. That's a good gritty resilience. But with the 50 seconds left and knowing that you need an onside kick, I'm never going to shame any team ever for messing up an onside kick. Needing them is not great either, but that's not always a super controllable thing. This one kind of feels like it was controllable. But yeah, I mean, the Lions are a gritty team, and I think they kind of lost some of that grit, some of that focus started to slip away as like everything that could have went wrong. And the Niners are also a pretty physical, pretty gritty team, can stay alive. One of the issues that they have though is that they are not able to climb out that far from holes because little things go wrong. And I'll give them props. I mean, the Niners played great on offense and defense in the second half. Came back. Were super, super, super resilient. Did everything they needed to get it tied, and then they could take the lead and hold on to it. So shout out to the 49ers. They looked really good in the second half of this game. They got a lot of things to look at in the first half. I think like we can't let that happen. A lot of stuff to look at in the second half though, and go, yeah, we might have been given some breaks by the Lions, but we still played really good offense, really good defense, and we did our job. When they went, obviously you have mistakes from the Lions, but those mistakes are because you played well on defense, right? The Lions go for it on 4th down, but you're the one stopping them on 4th down. So I mean, there's a lot in the second half for the Niners to look at and go like, yeah, we played good football here. we got a really hard win. Me personally, the way I'm going to judge football teams, I'd rather see a team win this kind of game than beat a team, by like 50 or something. I think this is a better show of what kind of team you are. It is great as well to go out and blow somebody out that much. That is also good. If the Lions would have kept the gas on and stayed locked in on defense and somehow beat the Niners by like 40 or something, I would say that's a good win. But I do think being able to come back down from like 24-7 and come back and take at one point a 10-point lead. I think that is very, very resilient. That is very good football. And I guess before, this isn't super relevant to this game, but we've had games in the playoffs where we have kind of both of those at the same time, right? The Chiefs come back on the Texans, they come back and end up putting up 50. So that's kind of both. They put up a huge point total and came back from a big hole. So yeah, I think you can have a mixture of both here. But yeah, then this is the kind of win you want to see from a football team, especially on an NFC Championship heading into the Super Bowl against the Chiefs. This is kind of what you need to know that they're capable of. If it gets in a hole, you can kind of think maybe it's not over for them. So a lot to look at, positive and negative here for the Niners. A lot to hang your head for if you're a Lions fan in this one, but also a lot to say like, hey, we had a really good season. Hopefully Dan Campbell's wrong and we're back next year.
Yeah, I mean, just to wrap it, it's like you're right in the sense of like, hey, we saw what this team is made of. You're down. This is the second game in a row they've been down. We keep seeing that staff for Kyle Shanahan. I don't remember what the specifics of it was exactly, but he's owing how many ever games in the games where he's down by this in at this situation. 2 straight games, they come back, they win it. Definitely like what they're made of. On the other hand, though, it is a little bit disturbing that they were even in that hole in the first place, especially after the game that they had against Green Bay. You would think, like, hey, let's really come in, lock in to start this game. They didn't, but hey, they were able to, again, some of it was luck. Again, the almost interception catch, near the goal line, which set up a score. Like, things like that, they just happen. But you can't take any credit away from them because they were able to lock in on defense, lock in on offense. Brock Purdy again, like you said, it was some runs like he just randomly decided he wants to run the ball over the field. Like that's not going to happen too many times in the game. But when what we've seen from him so far, for the most part, when they need to make plays, he makes plays. So we can have these conversations about how good he is if he's being carried and all that, but end of the day, the game is about winning and losing, and they just keep winning.